Good afternoon. My name is Mitzi Keys Glass, and I'm delighted to be with you this afternoon to talk about Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. I'd like to first thank the Artix Foundation for this opportunity to spend a few minutes with you talking about, again, National Mental Health Awareness Month. So this slide is just, again, an example of the idea behind National Mental Health Awareness Month, which is to care about each other and to share in each other's experiences, especially communities of color. And this is written in English and in Spanish. So what is the purpose of National Mental Health Awareness Month? The purpose first, and the month is always observed in July, is to bring awareness to the unique struggles that racial and ethnic minorities and communities face regarding mental illness in the United States. And this month, July, reminds us that mental illness can affect anyone, regardless of their race, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their gender or how they identify. It's also an opportunity for us to educate ourselves, to learn more about mental illness, disparities, stigmas, and how it impacts folks and persons in marginalized communities. Most importantly, I like to think that Minority Mental Health Awareness Month gives us an opportunity to think about how we can make a difference as we address the issues associated with mental illness in communities of color. So what is the history? This is a picture of Bebe Campbell, and Bebe Campbell is actually known as the founder of Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. She died in 2006 from a brain tumor. But Bebe Campbell was an author. She's written many, many books. She was a teacher, she was a mother, and she was an advocate for those who have mental illness. Her daughter, Mai, who's an actress, struggled with mental illness, and she talked about in the book 72-Hour Hold about the challenges of having a child with a mental illness. So that book really was the outgrowth of her own experiences. She was an advocate, and she worked and she worked and she worked to raise awareness for others who were struggling with stigma, disparities regarding mental illness. And in 2008, after she died, legislation was created to make July Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. So we thank Bebe Campbell and we honor her memory for what she did for those who have mental illness. This is a picture of her daughter and the person who was really, who she chronicled in the book 72-Hour Hold. And she really wrote a quote, and the quote said that once loved ones accepted the diagnosis, healing began for the entire family. But Bebe Campbell said it took years for her family and for her community to understand about mental illness. And she said, can't we as a nation begin to speed up the process? And she advocated for a national campaign to destigmatize mental illness, especially in the African American community. It's not shameful to have a mental illness, and she really, really, really implored people to get treatment and to know that recovery is possible. And she wrote that in 2005. So again, that's a picture of her daughter. This is the theme for this year, which is beyond the numbers. So every year there is a different theme for Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. And I love this picture because as you look at this picture, every one of these persons represent a different story, a different narrative, a different journey as they have struggled with mental illness. So really when we see persons of color, look beyond the numbers, the statistics, and really know that each person has a unique story related to their challenges with mental illness. So again, this is from the Mental Health America 2022 organization, and they reminded us that mental health affects everyone. and that the persons who are impacted have rich histories that go beyond statistics, that go beyond numbers. And their stories of resilience. That means that they are able to stand tall in the face of many challenges, born out of oppression, persecution, and abuse. And here's the best part, that there is immeasurable strength in what persons have to go through. And so being able to celebrate the uniqueness of BIPOC communities is important. So what are disparities? And when we talk about Minority Mental Health Awareness Month, we must talk about disparities. So the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality report that racial and ethnic minority groups in the U.S. are less likely to have access to mental health services, less likely to use community mental health services, and more likely to use emergency departments, and more likely to receive lower quality care. So disparities are differences. And the question that I believe our communities and our healthcare providers and our mental health providers should ask is, why are there disparities? Why are there differences? Why does not everyone, regardless of their race or their ethnicity, receive the same quality of services? This is a slide, and it's a little blurry, but I want to just draw your attention to disparities in different racial groups. So for instance, 20% of African Americans are more likely to report having serious psychological distress than non-Hispanic whites. Asian American women have the highest suicide rate of all women over the age of 65 in the United States. And Hispanics receive mental health treatment half as often as Caucasians. And there are other statistics out there, but again, just really wanting you to understand that it is not the same for everyone. So here's the reality. The reality is that in 2017, 10.5% of young adults aged 18 to 25 had serious thoughts of suicide, including 8.3% of non-Hispanic Blacks and 9.2% of Hispanics. In 2017, 7.5% of young adults aged 18 to 25 had a serious mental illness, including 7.6% of non-Hispanic Asians, 5.7% of Hispanics, and 4.6% of non-Hispanic Blacks. Again, looking at those disparities and looking at the in different cultural groups. COVID-19, we can't talk about mental health and mental illness without talking about COVID-19. And this is just a slide. I don't want to necessarily read it to you, but a slide that really draws our attention to what COVID-19 and the impact that COVID-19 had in our communities. And I know I've talked about racial and ethnic groups, but I also want to make sure we include LGBTQ as part of some of those marginalized populations that are struggling with stigma and disparities in relationship to mental illness. So again, without reading for you, I again want to draw your attention that during COVID-19, that many of these groups experienced more stress, but however, received sometimes not as much treatment as their white counterparts. And I drew attention to LGBTQ, Black adults, Native Americans, Hispanic adults, as well as Asian adults who were experiencing stress as a result of COVID-19, but often said that they received less treatment or care. So stigma, what is stigma? Stigma, and Bebe Campbell talked about stigma as a major barrier for her daughter receiving care, and identifies stigma as a major issue why communities of color don't receive care or don't access care. So stigma is when someone or even yourself views a person in a negative way just because they have a mental health condition. Some people describe stigma as a feeling of shame or judgment for someone else. And stigma can even come from an internal place of feeling badly about who you are. And that definition comes from NAMI 2022. It's feeling embarrassed, it's feeling ashamed, it's feeling like I'm going to be judged. And it's also fear of discrimination, how I'm going to be treated. Am I going to be treated differently if I acknowledge that I have a mental illness? We know that by research that in many communities and of color, to have a mental illness is seen as a weakness, is seen as something to be ashamed of, and that you come up with other alternative ways to deal with mental illness. So again, that shame, and sometimes guilt. I usually think of shame and guilt as cousins, but they go together and they prevent people from seeking the help that they need. So NAMI does a big initiative to help us erase stigma. And if you're able to go on their website, they even have a stigma pledge that we will all, as mental health professionals, as physicians, as community, to do what we can to erase stigma so that people will not feel judged and feel afraid sometimes to go get the help that they need. So, what can we do? So there are some things that we can do to erase stigma, and especially during the month of July when we're really thinking about minority mental health. Let's start the conversation about the issue of mental health in racial and ethnic minorities. Let's make it more, normalize it, not to be afraid or ashamed to talk about it and to bring up these issues. To be mindful of stigma and how it impacts receiving mental health services. So by us being mindful means that we can encourage persons to receive the help that they need without shame, without guilt, and to be supportive and to use supportive language and to have a supportive posture about how the importance of addressing your mental health. Educate yourself about how racism and injustice perpetuates disparities in communities of color in mental health services. And also to commit to be present and available to address the mental health issues of those that are different than yourself. And I would encourage you to remind you that change can occur, that there is hope, and that change begins with me and it begins with you. I would like now to introduce our next speaker, Ms. Eris Harmonia.
I'm Eris Harmonia, and I'm on the Arctics board also, and I've put together some references for everybody who's attending today and in the future. Like Mitzi said, July is BIPOC Mental Health Month. I did a little bit of research and put together these slides. Hopefully you can keep them and write down a few things that can help you. BIPOC mental health. That stands for Black, Indigenous, and People of Color. Like she said, Bebe Campbell was the person who went forward and got this passed. It was after her death, but it was passed for July to be the National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. Right there is a link that you can click, and it will take you to a website and give you more information. Miss Campbell found that she struggled to support her daughter who battled with mental illness, and there was a system that prevented her daughter from getting the help and support. She founded the NAMI Inglewood in a predominantly Black neighborhood to create a space that was safe for Black people to talk about their mental health concerns. There are some roadblocks that have been identified for opportunities for access and quality for equitable mental health care services for this group of people. It could be clinical, economic, environmental disparities. Those are different things that some people don't consider. And of course, the language and cultural barrier. The resources here are to help you navigate through some of the common roadblocks that you might face as a person. The Mental Health America organization is a great place to start. These links are from their site. The third link here is an actual screening tool that you can click on or retype and take the questionnaire. This is very helpful and will also provide additional resources once you complete the questionnaire. So that's this one right here, Take a Mental Health Test. If you go to this website, you can also navigate and find this test that you can take. Among the BIPOC communities, there's a cultural stigma. Mitzi talked about the stigma and what stigma is. It prevents early detection, which leads to missed opportunities for early treatment. As a community, we need to speak our truth and normalize speaking out when something seems off with someone's behavior or mood, or maybe even a lack thereof. Speak up when you notice yourself or someone else in a negative or unhealthy dialogue. Don't be afraid to ask the people you love if they are okay mentally. This is a very simple but necessary conversation to have with yourself and one another. Some of the family and community goals that we should have are to address these issues so we can have early identification, and also we can prevent them maybe if environmental and certain situations are the cause. If we talk about them, then we might be able to prevent them in other people. Another group of people that are affected by mental health issues for themselves or family or friends are caregivers. Caregivers in the BIPOC community tend to look at caregiving as a necessary and expected thing to do in their culture and in their families. I've put this slide together with a few links in there, which also includes a different screening tool. And this can help you determine if you may need support and or an outlet for the added stressors and responsibilities that caregiving of a family or a friend or loved one may cause in your own life. I put this slide in here as a kind of a different resource. Dr. Amen from the established Amen clinics is a pioneer in allowing us to see the brain and the mental effects of things such as PTSD, trauma, mental disabilities, and mental disorders, and how they affect our brains. You can actually go to this website, amenclinics.com, and see brain scans that show a normal brain versus a PTSD or even a trauma from maybe a car accident. So that's a very good place to go. There are numerous ebooks for free download for many types of mental health topics, such as the COVID brain. We all know how COVID has affected us. There is actually an ebook that is specific to COVID brain that you might find as a good resource. It's free. Also, bipolar and some other different ebooks are on there. I encourage you to spend time on the Amen Clinic sites and enhance your understanding and information on many mental illnesses and conditions. Dr. Amen spends time talking about misdiagnosis and how that can affect people in the long run. So I really encourage you to visit. It's a different outlook on things when you see all of his research. I've provided links here to help you find a therapist immediately online. Please visit these for help locally or virtually. If you're seeking a mental health advocate and or doctor for your family or your own self to put strategies for success together, there's the Black Mental Health Alliance and the link right there to connect with a therapist. And then on Google, I found a form that you can click on, and it asks you a few questions, and it can help you find a therapist in your area. I have included this slide in case you are in find yourself or someone you know in immediate health mental health crisis. You can call that number. You can text TALK to 741-741 and someone will respond immediately. And for our local area where we're based out of in Virginia, that's the local Virginia area director. If you have specific questions for our area and how to be involved, and that's a great person to contact there. This is my reference page. In closing, I hope that you can print a copy or save these slides to your phone, screenshot some of these numbers in case someone you know may need them. Thank you. And I'll hand it back over to you, Mitzi.
Again, we thank you so much for joining us. I know this was not a long discussion, but hopefully, again, just to bring attention to the need for us to address stigma, disparities in communities of color and the LGBTQ community, and do what we can to do our part as mental health professionals, the faith community, the health community. Each of us can make a difference. And I thank you so much for joining us.